So yesterday I had you read the poem I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud by Walt Whitman and kind of virtually annotate the poem as by way of answering some questions on that Google form. So today, as promised, we are going to break down the poem together, make sure you all sort of understand this poem, and then we'll look at just one last poem in this unit. And with that poem, I'll explain an assignment that you're going to have to do. That'll kind of be your shop week homework. You'll finish it over the weekend and upcoming shop week, and you can just send it to me via email by Monday of next academic week, which will be in quite some time, and I'll explain that to you after all of this is over. All right, so let's jump into poem analysis and annotations. The first stanza of the poem said, I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. So I kind of broke it down this way, right? If we're annotating, I put in purple words that we're paying attention to, and the annotations are in red underneath it or on the sides of it. I wandered lonely as a cloud. There's a couple things to look at there. The I tells us that it's first person tense, and that was one of the questions that was asked of you yesterday. First person, was written in I, me, my perspective. So why is it written in first person? We'll talk about that in a little bit, but we know that there is a narrator, there is a speaker. The word wandered is interesting to pay attention to. If you look at it, it's not just I walked around lonely as a cloud, it was I wandered. And to wander means kind of that you're aimless, right? And maybe that you're a little upset. If you're wandering around, it means maybe you don't have a destination in place, which is the perfect word to accompany the next part, lonely. Lonely as a cloud, so you're alone in some way. And we see that as kind of personification. You're personifying a cloud, and it's also a simile. You're comparing two things using like or as. Or means over in vales or lake valleys. When all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. So crowd and host, a large or great amount of golden daffodils. The word Whitman chose there is golden, kind of implying riches, right? You don't just say yellow daffodils, you say golden daffodils. So it gives them more of a value in some way to that speaker. Beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. So you can picture the breeze, the wind blowing and making the daffodils move, flutter, and dance, as it says, giving it that personification, which is another example of personification. Here we see our next stanza. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle in the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. So following the last stanza, this is talking more about the daffodils that he sees along the shore. Annotated, let's look at this. Continuous as the stars that shine. I asked you all to find a hyperbole and exaggeration. There's a couple here. Is it truly as continuous as the stars? Maybe not, but it gives it a sort of effect and it can help you picture it. And twinkle on the Milky Way, a sort of imagery appealing to the senses. Again, you can see these daffodils as they extend along the shore. And again, a never-ending line, another hyperbole if you wanted to say that, along the margin, which means edge, border of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. Annotating, we looked up words that we didn't know. So look at sprightly means lively or full of energy. And it says they're tossing their heads in sprightly dance. Do daffodils actually have heads that they toss when they dance? No, it's personification. Another example of that as we continue breaking it down. Our next stanza continues and says, the waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not be but gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. And breaking that down, let's look. It says the waves beside them danced. So the them is the daffodils, and the waves is the bay that it's right by, which is a body of water. Personification in saying that the waves danced, right? And we see a little caesura there. Couldn't help but look at that make you pause, kind of see what's going on. And then there's a shift. They outdid them. Those daffodils outdid those sparkling waves in glee. So it's personifying again. And by saying sparkling waves, another good example of imagery. A poet could not be but gay, gay meaning happy here, and a poet meaning we're shifting back to the speaker, the person in the poem, talking about themselves and saying that himself, he could not have been happier to see. These daffodils and these waves in such happy, lighthearted company. He's glad to be there. He's glad to be with nature, the waves, the daffodils. I gazed and gazed, says the narrator, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. We see the repetition of the word gaze there. So repetition, prolonged looking. He's looking at it. He's looking at it. That beautiful display of daffodils by the shore. And at the time, he doesn't consider, doesn't know what these daffodils will bring to him someday, eventually, what this nature experience, what this kind of will bring him, what it can give him. So what can nature give the narrator at some point? He will figure it out in the next stanza. Finally, our final stanza. For oft, when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. Broken down, we see the word oft reminds us of that Shakespearean language, right? Often, oft. When on my couch I lie. So we know that this is a time that's maybe in the future, away from the time when the speaker was originally looking in nature at the daffodils. Now the speaker is inside. So often when he's just lying on the couch at home, away from the daffodils, in vacant or in pensive mood. Look at those words that Whitman chooses to use, vacant or pensive. Vacant means empty, right? And then pensive is contemplating something, contemplative. So not exactly in a happy mood per se, almost kind of feeling empty, maybe that wandering, lonely type of feeling that he felt at the beginning of the poem. Often he's thinking about that. And then they flash upon that inward eye. So he's tuning in to the nature within, his eye, his soul, kind of reaching out to the daffodils, which is the bliss of solitude. So thinking about those daffodils, reaching from that inward self that he has, he feels happiness or bliss in being alone. He feels happiness in being alone versus the loneliness that he described himself as feeling earlier. It says, and then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. Personification, giving non-human traits, heart dancing with the daffodils, though. So he's feeling like he is one with the daffodils, one with nature, and the daffodils, which were described in such vivid, happy, perfect imagery early. Now the speaker in his heart feels the same way as them. So through nature, he was able to feel something, access something, and improve his mood and self in a way that he was not able to without those daffodils. So he's reflecting on this memory in nature, and he feels happy, filled with pleasure. It's helped enhance his mood. Point of view in this is first person, like I talked about, I, me, my. And the reason for it, answering the questions from yesterday, it's more personal. You can put yourself into the role of the speaker. It gives you a greater understanding of what that speaker's feeling in a way that maybe third person, sort of detached roles, he, she feels like this, you wouldn't feel as deeply. It's also very transcendental of them to put it in first person point of view, for Whitman to put it in first person point of view, because in transcendental poetry, they believe that the nature and the self are so closely linked together that by saying I, it sort of implies that link between I am nature, we are nature, kind of connecting with nature in that way. So let's finish our discussion and analysis with a wrap up on some more of the questions that were on yesterday's Google form. Themes. Through nature, you can find joy, happiness, and completion. We see this in Walt Whitman's poem, that through the daffodils, through reflecting on the daffodils and how he felt watching them, the speaker can find joy and happiness. His heart dances with them, so he feels complete, he feels joyful. And also that the purity of nature, being able to look at it, watch it, and see it, can improve the human experience and the human condition and how humans are and how humans function. So it's positive. And finally, how it connects to transcendentalism. So we're using our inward eye, the inside of us that can kind of connect with nature, that can reflect back on and think about nature. And remember that nature is us, right? We're connected to it. It can help us understand something deeper about humanity, ourselves, and it can, in its pure state, improve us in our moods. So it's beautiful and it's perfect, and it's something that can affect us profoundly as human beings and make us better. So we see all of these transcendental ideas within this poem of Walt Whitman, which hopefully you all kind of figured out as you were yourself reading it and annotating it yesterday. Let's look at one final example of a poem that I think is a good example of a transcendental poem. As you can see, it was written in the 1900s, 1913, perhaps not quite in that transcendental era, a little bit after, but it still makes the same transcendental themes and points of kind of connecting and better understanding nature. It's short, it's nice, it rhymes, and it's easy to kind of analyze and understand. So let's do that really quick together, because this poem is going to be important in understanding what your assignment is going to be for the next few days. Trees by Joyce Kilmer. I think that I shall never see a poem as lovely as a tree whose hungry mouth is pressed against the earth's sweet flowing breast, a tree that looks at God all day and lifts her leafy arms to pray, a tree that many in summer wear a nest of robins in her hair, upon whose bosom snow has lain, who intimately lives with rain. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree. We see in the first stanza a reverence, a love, an appreciation of a tree. We see in the next couple stanzas a description of the tree, great imagery, metaphors, personification. In the last one, again, we see that respect for the tree that says that poems are made by fools, right? Things that are created by humans are often foolish, but only God, this sort of divine and perfect thing, can make a tree. So again, equating trees or nature to something beautiful, pure, divine. So what do I want you to do with that poem that we just read? You have an assignment now. I want you to write your own transcendental poem. Informed by your reading of Trees by Joyce Kilmer, and particularly by the lessons about transcendental poetry, its poets, and examples that we've read, you must write your own transcendental poem. So what I want you to do is go out and kind of explore nature. You can go for a walk, spend some time outside, take a hike, just enjoy the weather. I'm letting this assignment go for quite some time because I understand it might be rainy the day that I post this. It might be cloudy, it might be kind of cold because that's April, right? But within the next couple days or weeks, I'm assuming there'll be one nice day that you all can go outside and take a socially distanced hike or walk and enjoy the weather. Take some notes on what you observe and decide how it could make you feel during this time. Ask yourself, what is this object in nature's purpose in nature? Does it benefit me? Can I relate to this object at all? In what ways? And why is this object special or beautiful in some way? For example, you might look outside and see a bee or a butterfly. How do bees and butterflies benefit the earth, nature? Do they benefit you? Is it significant to nature? How is it special? Write some notes down about it. So choose one particularly interesting, beautiful, or important object in nature and write a poem about it. The full assignment: write a transcendental poem of at least 12 lines about your chosen object. The poem must start with, I think that I shall, just like the Trees poem by Joyce Kilmer. And then you can add more to this line and make it your own. So that's the first line. You can add more to that first line, or you can just keep it like that. The poem does not have to rhyme like Kilmer's poem, though I recommend that you try and make it rhyme to fit more closely to Kilmer's model. It'll take a little bit more, maybe creativity and time, but I think that it'll be worth it with the poem in the end. Your poem must use vivid imagery, at least 3 different examples, just like Kilmer's poem used at least 3. Like Kilmer's poem to describe your object, and your poem must fit the ideas of transcendental poetry that we have discussed in previous lessons, whether that be connecting to nature in some way, enjoying and appreciating nature in some way, getting a greater understanding of the self through nature, etc. So something in your poem has to connect to some sort of transcendentalism in a way that you choose to do it. When you're done with watching today's lesson, you can go to the description of the video like you have been in previous days and fill out the Google form for today to get credit for today. As always, fill out your name. Do you agree with Whitman's poem's theme? So that was I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud. We analyzed that. You analyzed that too yesterday, and we analyzed it together to hopefully make it make a little bit more sense to you. Do you agree with it? Do you think that through nature we can be happier or relieved of feelings like sadness or loneliness? Why or why not? And explain. Totally fine to disagree with the poem and think that it was lame or you don't like it. Just explain why. 2 or 3 sentences. The next section of this you might not fill out for a couple days or you might not fill out this entire Google form for a couple days if you're waiting for nice weather to do it. So fill this out when you're ready with looking at your objects in nature. The first object that you observed was blank, and just you can write one word if you want. Some notes that you have about it. Notes could include thoughts on what is the object's purpose in nature? Does it benefit me? Can I relate to this object at all, and in what ways? Why is this object special or beautiful in some way? Repeat that for 3 different objects that you see in nature, and that'll give you 3 different subjects that you could write your poem about. So of those 3 objects that you looked at, kind of studied, wrote notes on in nature, which object might you consider writing your poem about and why? So you can choose one of them. Finally, check off, I acknowledge that I will receive hard copies of Trees by Joyce Kilmer and the poem assignment via email for my convenience. So I will send that to all of you via email. This assignment will not be due until next academic week. Sorry about that. How do I fix it? Okay. This assignment will not be due until next academic week, so I know I can take my time on this, put in effort, and produce good work. I know that this is just brainstorming. This is in this Google form, and I do not have to use everything I write on this Google form for my poem, so you'll just have to choose one of your objects, one of your things in nature to write your poem about, and you have all the time in the world to do this. So this isn't due until next academic week, which happens to be after April break. So let me tell you the date that this is officially due. It's not due until April 27th. So if today is April 10th, you have a good 17 days, 2 weeks, 3 weekends to do it. I think you'll be fine with that. So complete it on a separate sheet of paper. You can handwrite it and you can, take a picture, send it to me. You can type it and you can send it to me that way. There's a lot of different ways that you can get this assignment to me, and it's just due by April 27th. So take your time with it. Have a good time with it. So tomorrow I'll send you some hints on writing good poetry, ways that you can go about writing this poem, and we'll do hopefully a Zoom call, which via email you guys will get more information from if you want to take part. So talk to you soon.